Join From Beer to the Bible every week as Irvin Lee and co-host Sarah Oliveira McDonald warn others of the consequences of drug and alcohol addiction by being the voice of faith-based recovery. Every week, Irvin and Sarah help people get access to the treatment and counseling they so desperately need. They explore the depths of addiction and give practical life examples of how to recover and develop a new rhythm of living. The show is gritty, authentic, and simply raw while being rooted in the love, faith, and hope of God. Welcome to From Beer to the Bible.
Welcome to From Beer to the Bible. I'm your host, Sarah McDonald. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. John Young. Say hi to our listeners, John.
Hey, hi, how are you? Thanks for having me today, Sarah. It's really great to be with you.
Absolutely. Before we get started, we're going to go to the Word. And today we're in Matthew 6:33. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Today, the title of our show is Redeemed by Grace. And I personally know Mr. John Young for a while now. I met him at a TDCLA, Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Association conference 10 years ago, I would say. Is that right?
Let's see, I'll be sober if I make it to the 13th of next month. I'll be sober 12 years. So
okay, yeah, so it's about 10 years ago. Yep. And it was so cool because I was there for the first time representing La Hacienda Treatment Center, had a booth, and John came up to my booth and started talking. He was like, I went to La Hacienda, and I was so impressed that a lawyer came up to me and admittedly said that he went to treatment. And I was like, this is going to be a great conference. And little did I know, so many people in the law community have issues with substance abuse and mental health issues, and specifically suicide lately has been running rampant in that community. And I just really wanted John to come on the show to really talk to our listeners and our viewers about his story, and that this addiction, mental health, substance abuse, happens to all walks of life, all professions, specifically in the legal world. John is a former attorney trying to get his law license back, and it is through redemption that is probably going to become possible. And I'm going to let him talk to you a little bit about that. But the title of our show is Redeemed by Grace. And I thought it was so fitting because as I've gotten to know John and I know his story personally, he is literally a walking product of God's grace and redemption through Jesus Christ and what all of that can do. So John, tell our viewers a little bit of your story, and in the middle of it, I might stop you and ask some specific questions, but there's a lot to it, so let's just jump right in.
Right. Yeah, Sarah, again, thanks for having me on. What a great opportunity. I don't even know where to start the story. We can go back to the difficulties that alcohol caused me from, high school forward. Probably the most significant 30 years or 1990, when I was a young assistant DA, I had an accident after I'd been drinking a majority of the day, and in which a woman lost her life. And the addiction aspect of my life at that point was so compelling that I had a hard time ever getting past the whole concept that, I had just been involved in taking a person's life. A grand jury found that it was an accident. The evidence established that it was an accident, but nonetheless, those two kids lost their mother, and that was sort of the beginning. And I say the beginning. I'd been drinking long before that, but as I look back over God's grace, that story has, or that theme has been, been what got me through life. I remember sometime after having that accident. And, you know, again, I went through all the legal channels, and I accepted responsibility for the alcohol and legal responsibility. I'm not sure I ever accepted responsibility in my heart for that, in my mind. As any good alcoholic or drug addict will do, is I could rationalize anything. And, you know, if she hadn't been in the street, if it hadn't been this time of day, or there were all these what ifs. But the net effect is, it didn't change the way I looked at alcohol, and it didn't change the way that alcohol affected my life. And that probably is one of the most compelling parts of this story, is that most people would have gotten it. Most people would have said, wow, I need to really change the way I look at things. For me, in my addictive mind, my addictive soul, it wasn't about me changing the way I looked at things. It was about me changing how I could still do what I wanted to do, both professionally and personally, even with this deal in my past, this tragic accident. But in line with the story and the theme of this show, Sarah, sometime later, probably 10 or 12 years later, I get a phone call one night. My wife and I had just come home from the theater and the theater from a movie in Sweetwater, America. It's a movie, and the phone's ringing. It's like 10 o'clock at night. I don't know what it was, but intuitively, I mean, it had to have been God speaking. I thought to myself that I don't know why I automatically went to those children, but I thought that is one of those children. And I picked up the phone, and the first thing she said to me is, "Don't hang up. Please don't hang up on me." I'm going to tell this story. I hope I don't get emotional, but I said, "Well, why would I hang up on you?" She said, she gave her name, and she said, "Please don't hang up on me. I need you to know that I've forgiven you." And I was just, you know, how do you respond to something like that? I didn't know what to say. And I you know, thanked her. We talked for a few moments. I'd always felt horrible about that taking that relationship from those children, the two kids. And ultimately, she said, "I need you to know that." I mean, repeated, "I need you to know I've forgiven you. That this isn't." She didn't say it isn't all about you, but I hung up the phone thinking, "Wow, this isn't all about me. This is." So I was just perplexed. I knew what grace was. I'd spent a lifetime living in what I wanted the world to believe Matthew 6:33 said, and that seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. And my little caveat to that was, as long as God is blessing the things I want to do.
Yeah.
Hey, God, I'm going to do your will, and here's how I'm going to do it, kind of thing. I went to my pastor's home. He's a good friend, and I went to his home the next morning, like about 6 o'clock. And I beat on the door, and he's not awake yet. And I said, "Mark, I got to talk to you. I haven't slept all night." I told him the story I've just shared with you. And he looked at me and he laughed. He kind of smiled. And I said, "What is so funny about that?" And he looked, and in that smile, he said, "Because it's grace. You just accept it because it's grace. You can't earn it. There's nothing you can do to deserve it."
Yeah.
And I guess I hung my head and I thought, wow. And the great thing about that story on several levels is, as soon as I processed that, I didn't have any of the confusion anymore. I just had a real sense of gratitude. And the young woman and I have talked over the years 2 or 3 additional times, but that was just a moment of where my great failure, one of so many in life, was met by God's grace through another human being that frankly had every reason in the world to hate, to be angry, and so that was one of the early things that happened in my world. And I had wanted to be a lawyer since I was 16 years old. I can remember and you know, don't laugh terribly hard at me, but I can remember at 15, 16 years old saying the prayer, God, please don't let me die till I get to argue my first case. And I've told it to people, and they said, oh, not really. I said, no, really. That's exactly it. I was so fortunate to know exactly what I hoped to do when I grew up. And that's all I ever wanted. Actually, I wanted to be Henry Wade. I wanted to be a prosecutor. I wanted to be a DA. And, you know, alcohol took that away from me. Obviously, that was not going to happen after having an accident like that. And, but then God's grace brings me to West Texas, you know, small town West Texas, and I meet my wife and build a practice. And, you know, I was given a life that I had dreamed of, but I never could give up the alcohol. You know, the alcohol was always part of that life.
You were climbing that. You were climbing that ladder of success, and you were a really good lawyer, and you knew Jesus, but God had other plans for you, huh?
Well, yeah, that's right. And you know, I think sometimes, Sarah, that you know, we say, I know Jesus. I've been a Christian since I was a young man. You know, I walked the aisle when I was very, very young, and I remember telling Brother Petty, Paul Petty, I said, why do you come? And I said, because I'm always really mean to my brother and sister, and I just feel bad about it. I'm not really sure that was, you know, I confessed my sins in the Baptist church, but I know, you know, that over the course of time, that relationship was renewed and developed, and you know, baptism. I've undergone baptism a couple of times. You know, at least one preacher when I was in college convinced me that I hadn't had a real conversion experience. So, but in any event, yes, I did know Jesus, and I never doubted he was there. I never doubted that he was carrying life forward. I just always kind of thought that surely he wanted me to move forward in the life that I thought I should live. And, you know, God, again, you know, here's how I want to do your will, but here's how I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And I lived that way for a long time, Sarah. You know, I love things and use people. I have learned, fortunately, that's backwards. And that so sometimes when I talk about my experience, strength, and hope, I talk about the things that happened. I look back and I think, you know, what a real jerk I was. You know, yeah, I was successful, and yes, I was fortunate. I had 3 law offices in 3 different cities. I, you know, practiced in various courts. Got to argue a case in the Fifth Circuit, United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. You know, I got to do everything I ever dreamed of doing as a lawyer. But there was still something that wasn't there. You know, it was never enough.
Yeah.
If I had been president, I'd want to be king. You know, there was just never enough.
And we as alcoholics and addicts understand more than anybody what that is, and that hole we keep trying to fill. We fill with alcohol and other things and success and busyness and you name it, we fill it with that. And we forget that we need to fill it with God first. Even though we're checking off the box, we're not, like you said, it's like God's there, but I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to do it my way.
Sure.
I'm going to do it my way. And he's like, yeah, right. I'm going to show you.
That's right. Sure. I sometimes feel, Sarah, and this is going to sound like, you know, God's some marionette up there pulling the strings, and I don't mean it to sound that way, but I believe God has a path for me forward, notwithstanding prison, notwithstanding, you know, all of the things that have happened to me. But I sometimes think back at that 15-year-old kid, and I think, you know, I know what I dreamed of doing. I dreamed of speaking to lawyers. I dreamed of, you know, practicing in the big courts, having the big cases. You know, I got to do all of that. And I think sometimes I've wondered, and I just go with me here. I don't think God makes a joke of this, but I've sometimes wondered, okay, God looking down and saying, okay, son, I've let you do what you want to do. Now let's move forward with what I want to do.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's something that happens, but I sure know that I am grateful that I got to do the things that I got to do, and I hope to get to do them again someday. I love what I do here. Working with folks that are quite ill, but there's nothing like the passion of walking into a courtroom, and for guys like me anyway. Now, when I was a criminal defendant, it wasn't so much fun. But when I was the one trying the cases, it was much more fun. It's just been a extraordinary opportunity to at life that alcohol just trying to fill that hole, as you said, and whether it was with power, position, offices, stuff, things. It was never enough. It was just never enough.
When do you, John, think that you turned away from God? And it might be a couple of times in your life, but let's just talk about, the end of your drinking career. Like, what was the straw that broke the camel's back and got you into treatment?
Sure.
And I can say this from personal experience. I think, at that point, that's when we're like, okay, I'm far from God's plan. And for me, and I don't know if this is true for you, I experienced Christ again in treatment.
Well, I believe, and not just because of who you are or where I went to rehab or to but I believe La Hacienda is as hallowed a ground as there is. It is a place at which I don't know if I found God any more deeply than I already knew him, but I sure became more open to the God that is, the God that I knew, the God of my understanding. And that there's a guy named, I don't remember his last name. He was at LAHA as a counselor when I was there. And he was one of I think maybe he was working on a master's or some program that he was working there. And I'm perplexed about some of this recovery stuff one night, and I'm looking at the Central Texas Stars, and this fellow walks up, and he says, "Are you still trying to put God in that box?" And I didn't really know what he was talking about. I really thought, frankly, I thought, well, who the hell are you? I knew who he was, but I wasn't sure what he was saying. And I looked at him and I said, well, guess I really know what you mean. And he looked at me and he said, maybe you ought to try kicking the sides out of that box. There's a whole lot of God out there that you're not seeing. And he walked away. I've looked back on that several times over the years. I'm really glad he walked away, because I would have spent the next 20 minutes or longer trying to rationalize why what he said wasn't right.
Mm-hmm.
But it was absolutely right. That little box that I had put God in, that God, I'm going to do your will, and here's how I'm going to do it, had so hindered who I was and how I did life. You asked a bit about how I got to LAHA, and it's an embarrassing story. It's the story. But I was in the throes of self-adulation and self-admiration, and a lot of us are criminal defense lawyers, particularly. We tend to like ourselves a bunch, and we like each other, and we try most of the time, and we learn from each other. So anyway, long and short of that story is, I had become capital murder eligible, one of 3 lawyers in the region at that time who were eligible to be appointed in capital murder cases. This was before the public defender's office for capital murders. I was doing violent crime from, trying cases in Midland and Lubbock and San Angelo and Dallas, and frankly, having a grand time. Just an extraordinary gift that was life at that point. And it just wasn't enough, so I had to, I drank more.
You had to celebrate the successes.
I'm sorry?
We had to celebrate the successes.
Of course. What is it what is it Joe Harlow used to say down at Wise? You know, is it sunny? Yes, I drink. Is it cloudy? Yes, I drink. Is it have a marriage? Yes, have a breakup? Yes, I'm breaking up. Everything was a reason to drink, you know. But during that time, pardon me, I began having an affair with a lady that was a former cop and a cop's ex-wife, and it was obviously no extramarital affair is ever good. This one was particularly toxic, and after hurting my wife and my staff and everybody that that cared about me at all, because they could look in and see what they could see what I couldn't see. It's like a friend at my AA group says, I can see the gun to your head and you can see the gun to my head, back of my head, but I can't see the gun to the back of my own head.
Yeah.
And I everybody else could see it but me. And the culmination of that was a altercation with the ex-husband police officer that did not go well, and that resulted in my being arrested and charged. And the charges, I was ultimately indicted on an aggravated assault, which was later dismissed, and I accept responsibility for the firearm charge, which is what I actually did. And I was broke. I was scared. I thought, hey, I'm gonna lose everything. And again, it was still about John. It was still about, I'm gonna lose everything. What's gonna happen to me?
Yeah.
I was concerned about my family also, but what's going to happen to me? That was my
well, you knew that you were going to lose them too if you didn't make a change.
Well, that's right. And I don't know why my wife, I don't know why Tracy has stayed with me. That in and of itself is an act of grace. But I'm damn sure grateful she has, and I can say with joy that our relationship is better today than it's ever been. Maybe because I say yes, ma'am, a lot more than I used to. But I've learned that that's always a good answer. But when I went to Lahat, the highway down there to Hunt, the cut across from Interstate 10 down to Hunt, I forget the name of the highway, but it doesn't matter. The whole way down there, I'm on the phone with lawyers, one federal magistrate judge, several other judges, apologizing for how I had so embarrassed them by doing by getting involved in this. And, after I got through with rehab, I talked to several of them, and almost without exception, it was like, what I thought was funny was that you were worried about embarrassing me, and I didn't know anything at all about it. And you shouldn't have been worried about that at all. Again, another of the traits of the self-absorbed alcoholic, it was all about me. I'm sorry that I embarrassed. I came out of La Hacienda with a much different perspective, and that's something that I will be forever ever grateful for. I believe there's always a way to get to that point. And some people will say, well, I don't have the money, or I didn't have the money, but because of a very generous benefactor, I was able to go to La Hacienda. I was able to keep my law office open for the 30 days. And another act of grace arising out of that, 2 or 3 years later, when I started trying to repay him, he said, I just got a big bonus at my Fortune 50 company that I worked for. And it was exactly 3 times what I loaned you. And I just believed that was God's way of saying that I needed to forgive this, and never asked me to pay any of it back. Matter of fact, sent me the first check back. And it's always possible. There is always a way when God's involved in it. There is always a way.
Absolutely.
And I try to encourage folks that have the kind of get this fear that, oh, I'm not going to do this because, and which is probably part of what got me in trouble in my younger day. I've always been, I'm going to do it unless. And I try to, when it comes to rehab and to getting well, I try to encourage people to take the tact, I'm going to do it unless, rather than I'm not going to do it because.
So, John, on the theme of Redeemed by Grace and hearing your story and your experience about, reaching success and then, having some failures and having to go to treatment. I think that's all such a beautiful story. And thank you for being so open and honest with us. What has kept you sober? What's we call it a rhythm for living here at From Beer to the Bible. So we talk about that a lot, about what we do on a daily basis to keep us connected to Christ and to keep us connected to our recovery. So what is your rhythm of living, and what do you do every day to maintain sobriety and God's will?
I love the term, the rhythm. There are things that every day I read, maybe not 7 days out of 7, but 4 or 5 out of 7. I read 84, 85, 86, 87, 88 in the big book. I need that step 10 reminder every day. I try to be intentional about following those steps. I think, it's sort of like losing weight. I've been heavy my whole life, and if I'm intentional about it, if I pay attention to what I'm doing, and I worry about, not worry, I am aware of when I treat the lady at the counter, maybe not poorly, but just when I'm snide with her, merely because she doesn't want to take my credit card at the moment I want to give it to her or whatever. That's my bad. That's not hers. And I need to be aware of that. I need to be more aware of where other human beings are. And that's one thing I try to do every day. And I don't read, I'm not completely faithful on that, but I do, 4 or 5 times a week. There are 5 things that to me are important to staying sober. And these aren't novel. This is, anybody that's ever been to AA can tell you these things probably. But, I pray and meditate every day. I try to stay focused on, not my will, but thine. I read the big book, some portion of it every day. I've got a big book everywhere I go, from my bathroom to my office here to my automobile, everywhere I go. I've even got them at both my children's houses in Dallas in case I happen to forget mine, which is never going to happen because I always two or three. But I believe in the big book. Some call me a big book thumper. That's great. I went to law school. You had to read books. You had to know what was in the books. You had to be able to recite the books. I need to take my recovery at least as seriously as I took my academia. So read the big book, pray and meditate, work with others. If I can find somebody to talk to, if I can find somebody that maybe has questions, if I can just find somebody to get me out of myself, that there is somebody more important than I am for just that few minutes, then I got a chance to stay sober today. Call my sponsor. I've always been horrible at that. No excuses. I just don't do it well. Pray, meditate, call my sponsor. There's one more there, but pray, meditate, call my sponsor, read the big book, work with others. I'll remember it maybe by next time, Sarah. Right. I don't. But those things.
If it's the 5 Alive, it's pray in the morning, call another alcoholic, read literature, some kind of literature from the big book, call your sponsor, go to a meeting, and pray at night.
Go to meetings. And that's the other thing. I go to meetings. I got out of rehab. I left La Hacienda on the 14th. My paralegal's brother was in the program, had been for 30-something years. Turned out to be my first sponsor. I was halfway afraid of him, which was a good thing. And I met him at the meeting on the 15th. And, I went 4 or 5 times a week for the first probably 5 years. I still make 3 to 4 meetings a week. I think meetings are absolutely important. If for no other reason, it makes me be humble before myself, even if just for an hour. And sometimes that hour is all I need to kind of get me
back on track.
Yeah, kind of get me kickstarted back to where I need to be.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, thank you for being on the show, John. We're going to come back with John for part 2. John is now the operations director at Big Country AIDS Resources. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what that organization does?
Sure. Yeah. So it's a small healthcare organization here in Abilene, Texas. As indicative, or as indicated by the name, we provide medical and healthcare services, as well as social services to folks living with HIV and those that support them. Testing, treatment, housing, help with insurance, just a host of start to finish type services that helps folks be able to function with HIV. In the old days, back in in the 80s, I guess, it was a death sentence. Somebody said you got HIV, and you just kind of wait to die.
Yeah.
Now I know people that have been living with HIV with the medications we have available today, 20, 25 years. It's not a death sentence anymore. Unfortunately, however, there are still landlords that will kick you out if they see a letter from an HIV treatment facility. There are still churches that will ask you not to come back. There are still doctors, maybe a doctor that you've seen your entire life, finds out you get proof of positivity, you get an HIV diagnosis. Unfortunately, there are still healthcare providers that will not see that person anymore. Those are the things that we work on correcting in society. That sounds very highfalutin, and I don't mean to be high society. We're just trying to help people be able to live, and that really is the bottom line. And we've been very fortunate here in Abilene, even during some of the very difficult times in the last couple of years. We've had grant funding and local funding that has allowed us to continue to help folks. And I'm just grateful to have a job here. It's a great place to work, and I'm glad to be here. To be here.
Well, it's not by chance, I don't think, that you're working in that industry and that you're helping others. And that's part of God's grace, is showing you, what he's done, what he's still doing, what you can do for other people through your experience. So thank you for being on the show, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's From Beer to the Bible. Make sure to tune in next week when Irvin and Sarah gift you with even more addiction recovery information. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And remember, we're always there for you.